Hi, it's Dayna, and I'm here with your divination for the full moon in sidereal Capricorn. The 2025 Sidereal Astrology Guide says, clearly seeing the limits of emotional repression. Break down. If you can't hold it, let it hold you. Let it carry you. When you've done all that, you. Okay, first off, before I dive into all this full moon stuff, it's a lot going on in the sky right now. And these are the moments where it can be quite a challenge to parse out which particular astrology thing that's happening in the sky is manifesting in what event. And sometimes it's not clear cut. Sometimes it's overlapping. And I think this is one of those moments of where there's so many things going on in the sky that are connected to each other that it's hard to parse out what each particular configuration is manifesting as. So, of course, we've got the full moon in Capricorn that happens every year. We've got Mars in Virgo opposing Saturn right at the time of the full moon, which that hasn't happened in 28 years, 1997. There was actually a Mars retrograde in Virgo at the top of 1997, and Mars and Saturn opposed 3 times that year. Then we've got Venus conjoining Jupiter in Gemini. That hasn't happened in 24 years. Okay, 2001. I want to say July or August of 2001 was the last time that Venus and Jupiter conjoined in Gemini. And then we've got Mercury stationary direct in Cancer next week while we're still under the full moon. So it's a lot of stuff going on. And I think if I were to break it down, the two stories which are definitely connected and overlapping is the Mutable story and the cardinal story. The Mutable story is ongoing. We've been in this for a while. I would say there have been bits and pieces of this story for a minute. In my email newsletter that I sent out last week, I talked about how a lot of what's going on goes back to even 2020 when there was a Mars retrograde in Pisces where Saturn is now. I won't rehash all of that now. I'll try to link a link to the email so you can read it. I don't know if my email platform will let me do that, but I'll try so that you can read it too. Um, where was I? So the Mutable story, how do I know what I know? This is the eclipses, this is the Saturn Jupiter square, this is Venus and Mars stepping all over the Saturn Jupiter square that's still in play. And this is reorganizing our personal and collective hierarchies of trust. This is changing our belief systems. This is all of the ways that we are kind of in this chaotic era of information where we are seeing the decline of the expert and the rise of the skeptic. And one of the things that I talked about in that email that I sent out to my list last week is that the rise of the skeptic, I think, is a cyclical thing that happens because whenever we have power hierarchies that are rooted in these kind of fabricated social constructs, there are going to be inevitable contradictions that cannot be reconciled. For example, as I talk about in that email, we've all been indoctrinated and conditioned to believe that we live in a meritocracy, that if you get the requisite knowledge, if you study hard, if you stay committed, you get your degree, you work hard, you become an expert in your field, that is going to correlate with respect from your peers, a position of authority or responsibility, and material security for your family. You are taught that if you work, you will get your needs met, that work is the way to get your needs met. And here come all of these contradictions where people who don't have the requisite knowledge or experience, people who are working really hard, right? There's this inverse relationship where the hardest workers are paid the least and the least qualified are given the most authority and responsibility. And so this is a contradiction where only a skeptic can reconcile for us, because anybody who is in the system is going to be hard pressed to criticize that system in a way that undermines its legitimacy, because that system is giving them their validation. It's giving them their check. It's giving them their authority. It's giving them respect and visibility and power. You know, one of the interesting things that I think we're witnessing with Kamala Harris and her saying that, no, I cannot go back inside the system and think that I'm going to do anything here. It's like, yeah, girl, could have told you that. Okay. But we all learn in our own time. And I know how Gen X is really struggling to reconcile the contradiction of, you know, making it to a better place materially and in society than their parents did with the gestures broadly that's going on, right? But this is what this moment is about. It is about, how do I reconcile the contradictions between my indoctrination and the reality that is being made apparent to me? Go back 2 episodes, my friends, and listen to the reading or divination for the full moon in sidereal Sagittarius, because what did I say? Clearly seeing the contradiction between indoctrination and new information. This is where the skeptic arises, because the skeptic is the one who takes the risk to reconcile the contradiction for you. To say, hey, I'm going to tell you why you work so hard and you don't have any money. You can't afford a house. I'm going to tell you why you have a job, but you can't afford your rent. I'm going to tell you why this person that you don't respect is in a position of authority and power over you. And this can go both ways, okay? We get that young Kennedy boy who is talking about, he literally said we should not trust experts, right? And he is a very great example of how a skeptic gets into a position of authority, because the inherent contradictions of capitalism have primed us for this moment, because capitalism cannot reconcile the contradiction of our incessant material instability and insecurity with the fact that we did all of the things that they told us to do in order to get the place that we wanted to go. Right? So, this is the mutable of this moment. AI is presented as this panacea that levels the playing ground of information so that education or access is no longer a barrier to having knowledge. But at the same time, that devalues knowledge. And what it values in its place is wisdom, discernment, discretion, because you can have access to all of the information in the world. But if you cannot make a distinction between what is fact and what is fiction, you might as well not know anything. If you cannot discern the intentions or understand the intentions of the source and why they might frame the information in a certain way, you might as well be ignorant and have access to no information. So at the same time, we are seeing the rise of the skeptic. We are also seeing the rise of the oracle. We are seeing the rise of the philosopher. We are seeing the rise of the spiritualist. We are seeing the rise of who can make sense for this, who can discern for me. And I think before, we created these hierarchies of who knows the most, who has the best degree, who is the person who has, gotten the validation in respective institutions, who has gotten beyond the keeper of the gate in order to get into the space that gives them validity and power and responsibility and authority, right? And again, because racism and misogyny and patriarchy and class have been the gatekeeper to these positions and institutions, and those things in and of themselves are in contradiction with this idea that we live in a meritocracy. Of course, someone like Kennedy can arise in popularity because he is capitalizing off of the existing skepticism that people are already feeling. And so this is why we have to be really, really careful in terms of who we let interpret things for us. There are all kind of people on TikTok and all of these apps who are telling you what the discrepancies and contradictions you're witnessing mean. And so I think it's important to be able to make the distinction between someone who can recognize a contradiction and someone who can reconcile the contradiction for you. Can I get an amen from the saints in the back? Amen. Okay. The other story is the cardinal story. And this is the story of Cancer, quite frankly. This is the story of Venus retrograde in Cancer, the spring and summer and fall of 2023. This is the story of Mars retrograde in Cancer from fall 2024 through spring 2025. This is the story of Mercury retrograde in Cancer all of July and all of August. This is the story of Jupiter in Cancer beginning in October. Your Cancer house is blowing up. If you have not listened to the most recent episode of the Divination for Liberation podcast, you should do that. That was for the new moon in sidereal Cancer, which is planting seeds of emotional embodiment. So now we are at clearly seeing the limits of emotional repression. And if I could just say this real simple, it's only so much that you can deny the emotional impact that things are having for you. We all reach the limit at some point. And we have this full moon in Capricorn every year that serves as like a checkpoint, right? For checking in with ourselves and sometimes coming into the right relationship and proper perspective with what is bothering me. Physically, what is bothering me? Emotionally, how do I really feel? In what ways have I been in denial about what my needs are? I've been in denial about how I'm feeling. I have been repressing consciously. Well, actually, rewind, because I think of repression as unconscious denial and suppression as intentional or conscious denial. So, in both of those terms, suppression and repression, how has that played a role in our capacity to get our needs met and acknowledge what we feel? I want to make a distinction that emotional repression is different than numbing. Numbing is I want to be in control of what I feel. And so we normally numb one feeling with another. We numb the grief with drunkenness. We numb the loneliness with overeating. We numb the pain with THC. We take one feeling and we use it to not feel or to distract us from another feeling. That is the realm of the moon in Cancer. But repression is to not even be aware of, to not even recognize the emotional or physical weight of something because we have not experienced the type of attentive care that teaches us how to recognize those signals our body gives. I often think of anxiety as all of the feelings and sensations and needs that were ignored bubbling up under the surface as like a alphabet soup of emotions. All of the feelings just tangled up without any defined articulation that allows us to recognize them. So this full moon's clearly seeing the limits of emotional repression is like, it's only so long that you can exist in that state before it erupts in one way or another. It can erupt as depression. It can erupt as bipolar disorder. It can erupt as a manic episode. It can erupt as a binging episode. It can be erupt in tears. It can erupt in burnout. It can erupt in whatever coping mechanisms that we reach for in order to deal with or in order to cope with and survive what we have experienced. Cancer, through all of this time period that I've mentioned going back to 2023, in the last episode of the Div for Lib pod, I talked about the Cancer stellium in 2019 that serves as like the opening bookend to Cancer activity, to what Cancer means for us and the long-term story of what it represents and what it correlates to in our lives. Cancer is always going to be, you are in need of care. And the moon in your birth chart is actually articulating your relationship with being in need of care and receiving care. If you were born, you have a placement of the moon in your birth chart, which means you experienced being in need of care and receiving care in a very specific and particular way. Let's go through the moon signs really quickly to just give a brief run through of how each of the moon signs experienced the need to be taken care of and experienced receiving care. Hey, if you want to listen to the moon sign interpretations that I did in today's episode of the Div for Lib podcast, go to the link in the description, and there you will find a link to the Div for Lib Podia, where you can find this special content for my subscribers. If you would like to support the Div for Lib podcast, $6 a month, and it's all yours, boo. And I will thank you so much for helping me keep this work going, to feed and house myself, and to continue giving y'all this really, really, really good content. Okay, bye. Enjoy the rest of the podcast. I think that the lesson of this Cancer for every moon sign, no matter what your moon sign is before you go down any rabbit hole about what your feeling might be about, please make sure that you've pooped today. Please make sure that you've gotten your electrolytes. Please make sure that you've eaten. Okay, that you're getting all of your macros and your vitamins and minerals. Okay, please make sure that you have slept enough and lay off the caffeine and alcohol is all I'm saying. Okay, before you go down the rabbit hole of all of the other things, meet the basics first. Okay, clearly seeing the limits of emotional repression is, it's only so long that you can deny what it is that you know you need. It's only so long that you can ignore what you know that you're feeling. And this full moon is ruled by Saturn in Pisces. Remember, Saturn stationed the retrograde rather back. When did Saturn station retrograde? July. That was just last month, July 12th. Ignoring the literal to see the implied. Not for you, Pisces. Cut it out. Yes, and then the first fill in the blank for when Saturn first entered Pisces back in March of this year, connecting the dots to shape reality. This is about recognizing our own patterns. This is about being able to recognize the patterns of how we relate to our own needs in order to make sense of what they mean for us. When we experience distress, when we experience pain or just emotions of any kind, we all have a go-to story about how we should respond to them and what they mean. And a lot of times, this keeps us from meeting ourselves where we are emotionally and physically in the moment. That we tend to respond to our distress in the ways that our distress was responded to. We tend to interpret our pain in the way that our pain was interpreted us, or either the meaning that we deduced from how we were being treated. And so, as long as Saturn's in Pisces, while we're still in these Pisces and Virgo eclipses, we have one more on September 21st. We're going to be changing our belief systems. This is how we integrate the mutable and the cardinal, right? This is how this story is coming together at this full moon, that we are recognizing our own patterns of repression and how that has impacted our relationships, how that has impacted the way that we expect our needs to even be met. It has impacted what we even define as a need. Maybe that's where we really should have started. What is it that you even define as a need versus a desire or something extra? I think people are going to land in a lot of places across the spectrum, but I think that coming into right relationship with comfort and what that really means. Comfort is a combination of having our own stress alleviated while the stress of the people around us is also alleviated. Mm. Comfort requires systems for the alleviation of everybody's stress. This is getting back to, was it the last reading? Whatever reading where I pulled the 10 of Pentacles and I talked about shared enoughness. Shared enoughness is also, yeah, there are sometimes I'm not going to be comfortable if my neighbor is hungry. And as a matter of fact, if I have the most and my neighbor doesn't have enough, my most is definitely in danger of being taken. So my personal comfort can never really exclude the comfort of other people because at the very least they going to see what I have and want some. And like, hey, let me just be really real. As long as we live in capitalism, like, I'm never going to fault you for getting yours. You have to do what you have to do in order to eat and survive in this society. And I'm just not the person that is going to guilt trip myself anymore or other people for being comfortable. We have to be of two minds and hold the contradiction between what is really required for collective change, how much is in my personal power, and how little making a martyr of myself and suffering does anything to actually move the needle. There are people who feel like their personal comfort, I talked about this in the last reading, right? There are people who feel like their personal comfort is an affront to their principles. But I want to take it a step further and say there are people who feel like their personal comfort is contributing to the discomfort of their neighbor. And there are some people for whom that is true, who have hoarded and amassed so much on the backs of exploiting other people, that is absolutely true. But for most of us, you just feel a sense of responsibility for the suffering of your neighbor that is disproportionate with your actual power to change things. And I'm going to tell you right now, that is a surefire way to depression. Mm. I'm thinking about how many of us perceived or experienced neglect that made us that actually was denying our own comfort, having our actual emotional needs denied so that somebody else could be comfortable, so that somebody else was indulged. And this is really playing out the dynamic of what capitalism is, that we suffer, we struggle without having enough. And we weave all of these stories and myths and belief systems to figure out, what am I doing to make my life this way? What am I doing to keep not having enough? And like, yeah, there are things that you can do. There are spiritual remedies. There are things you can do in the material world. But as a social reality that we are all always on the edge of falling into or wading deeper into, we live in a society that is structured so that most of us don't have enough. Seeing clearly the limits of emotional repression is, how long are you going to tell yourself this story that it's your fault that you don't have enough care? How long are you going to tell yourself the story that it's your fault, it's something that you're not doing as to why you don't have enough food? This is where I really have mad beef with all of this manifestation stuff. Like, I'm not going to discredit the spiritual realm. I'm not going to discredit the ways that engaging in certain spiritual practices can shift our material conditions. But, like, honestly, if we're not all doing it together, I'm going to have to spiritual condition and spiritual work my till I die. Which, like, Siddhartha or the Buddha might say, yes, that is it. Life is suffering. Okay, meditate until you die so that you don't come back here or whatever it may be, right? I'm going to pause there and I'm going to pull some cards. Before I pull cards, I don't have a lot of time on this podcast, so I really didn't get to talk about Mars opposite Saturn, and I really didn't get to talk about Venus conjoined Jupiter. But every third Wednesday of the month, I have an astrology meetup for the 2025 Sidereal Astrology Guide. It's at 6 p.m. Central on Zoom. We go deeper into detail on all of the astrology of the month and how it applies to you, your life, and your chart. We'll be talking about all of the things here, the Mercury retrograde and Mars and Venus and Jupiter and all that stuff on August 12th, I believe it is. I'll drop the link in the description for you to register. But if you want to know more about how the big picture is impacting you and the specifics of the astrological configurations this month, come join me third Wednesday of this month, 6 p.m. Central via Zoom. Okay, let's get into these cards. We've got the 10 of Wands. The 10 of Wands is you doing too much, boo. The 10 of Wands is you are not acknowledging your limitations, or you are in a situation that is beyond your capacity to hold. Sometimes it could be the straw that broke the camel's back. Sometimes it's really that you don't have a choice but to finish what you started, and it is too much, or you're going to be real tired when it's done. I think I just want to use this card to name the exhaustion of the constant crises. When I wrote my piece, 2025 Crises, Cults, and Contradictions, insert Oprah meme. I'll drop the link in the description for you to read it. If you already read it again. But yeah, crises of contradictions is how we get to the point of change. And the 10 of Pentacles is one of those moments where the responsibility that you actually have or feel is disproportionate with your power to execute or make something happen. It's too much for you. We've got the Page of Wands, another Wands. And we've got the Page of Pentacles. Pages are map makers. Say it with me, class. Pages are map makers. And in that sense, pages are curious and exploring whatever little element or tool that they're working with. The Page of uh, uh, Wands is more of a map maker in the sense of really being curious and figuring out, how much energy do I have? What am I capable of? Where can I go with what I have? What can I do? How am I going to get there? Right? It's mapping out our energy in the sense of our will and our ambitions. I think even just with that, the 10 of Wands is like, you really can't do everything. Very Saturn coded, right? You can't do everything. And I don't know why you would want to do everything, because what really matters the most to you? I think that the Page of Wands is beckoning us to reconsider our own patterns of the way that we deal with things and the way that we handle things, particularly in ways that gives us the burden share of the control or responsibility for something that really is not our responsibility. I think part of the word here is give responsibility back to who it belongs to, or at the very least, take it off your own shoulders, right? Because it really is not your responsibility. And then we have the Page of Pentacles, which is, I think, a card that we've had recently, which is about budgeting. It is about, again, the curiosity of counting and measuring and calculating our resources and what we have. I talked earlier in the astrology portion of this divination about how We have these habitual ways that we respond to our distress and our pain and our feelings that are rooted in the way that we were responded to. I kind of broke some of that down in the descriptions of the moon signs. But I think these pages are really like, yo, do you want to tell that story? Is the way that you are engaging emotionally with yourself, is the way that you're relating with others reflective of your actual capacities? Is it reflective of where it is that you actually want to go in your life? Or are you struggling to confront the reality that you're not there anymore? There in the sense of the spaces that formed the relationship that you have with your emotions. Maybe that's the thing that the 10 of Pentacles is saying, hey, put that down. Like you're literally not there anymore. Because this may not even be negative in the sense that you're doing too much. It could be in the sense that you are not fully aware of what is available to you right now. Mm. You are not fully aware of the fact that you can choose different, that you can do differently. You know, a lot of times we get into these repetitive relationship and relating dynamics or emotional dynamics that, like, we can just feel ourselves turning into a little kid all over again. We can feel ourselves shrinking into the small child that was powerless, to do anything but to conform to a situation. And while I don't think pages are the most romantic or exciting cards, I do think that they bring an influx of curiosity and openness that is absolutely necessary for disrupting patterns and changing the belief systems that keep us trapped in certain dynamics. So the Page of Wands is really, are you doing what you want to do, or are you doing what you've always done? Can you take off the blinders and see how much more of the map is available to you now? Because first of all, you've grown. Okay. First of all, you is grown, boo. And the Page of Pentacles is really about assessing the material impact of things in our lives. We're kind of bringing together these two elements here, or these two suits, the wands and the pentacle here, to really ground us in the reality of what is now and not what was. This opens up a door and an opportunity for us to respond in new ways. It opens up a door and an opportunity for us to see ourselves clearly, to see what we're capable of, to consider and to revisit old goals and old ambitions for ourselves, to realize a type of resourcefulness, which is the gift of Capricorn, in terms of soberly assessing what we have the capacity for, what we have the time for, and what we have the resources for. Are you using what is available to you well? Right? That's kind of the story of the suits in a lot of ways. Or at least the Page of Pentacles is asking that question today. Are you using well what it is that is in your possession or what you have access to? Or are you doing the Ten of Wands things where you are not even making use of what it is that's right in front of you? What are the stories that are keeping you trapped in not enoughness when enoughness is right there? What are the emotions you confront when you reach out, when you cry for help? Is it shame? Is it embarrassment? Is it loss of control? Is it uncertainty? What is it? What is the feeling that arises when you reach out for actually what's in front of you? I know many of us were truly indoctrinated and adapted to circumstances where we absolutely were shamed for needing. Is that the story you want to live now? Can you relinquish the responsibility of shaming yourself? Because it is a responsibility. If you grew up in an environment that shamed you for needing, you had to shame yourself first to talk yourself out of reaching out for help. Or if you had to ignore yourself, your needs, your emotions, disregard them, not make too much of them, keep them small, why are you still doing that to yourself? You really don't have to. Happy full moon. I'll see you in a couple weeks. We're going to be getting into eclipse season. The new moon in sidereal Leo is not an eclipse, but the full moon in sidereal Aquarius after that is. And then after that, we'll have a new moon in sidereal Virgo. Yep. In the meantime, in between time, yes, we are still in a COVID surge. I see that peaking. Let me give you a date, my friends. It's sometime in early September that Mars squares. Oh, that's because I'm looking at August. No. Yeah, it's sometime in early September that Mars squares Jupiter. So that's when I think we'll reach the peak of the current COVID surge. Mask up in all indoor places. It's good for you. Don't worry about it. It's good for you. Trust me. And I'll see you soon. Bye.